Hey everyone, welcome to my kitchen. I'm Bethany, and today's recipe I'm going to be showing you how to make a delicious quiche, and this is my version of a quiche Lorraine, and it has all my favorite flavors in it because I love a good quiche. So you'll find some leeks and bacon and cheese, of course, and I definitely will say that out of all the quiches I've had, this is one of my favorites. So let's get right into it. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is get our pie crust ready, and I'm actually going to be using a food processor for this. I find that it's really easy. It brings the dough quickly together, but you can also just do a bowl and you'll shred the butter with like a cheese grater rather than just cubing it. But first we're going to do 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And I know that making a pie crust is a little bit more involved. It does add more time to this recipe. You can totally just buy a store-bought pie crust, save yourself some time, but it is worth it to make your own because it just is really nice and flaky and buttery. So 1.5 cups of flour, then a teaspoon of white sugar, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, and then I have 9 tablespoons of cubed butter, and I just sat that in my freezer so that it could become a little bit more, not frozen, but just nice and cold, because the colder the butter, the better the crumb is gonna be on our pie crust. I'm gonna pour the water in as I go. I have 1/2 cup of ice cold water. And I don't really want to have it going forever. We don't want a tough pie crust, so that looks good. Then I'm going to transfer our dough onto the countertop. No flour or anything is needed. And we're just going to bring everything together. I don't want to overwork it. Again, that can result in a tougher pie crust. But I just want to bring all the crumbs together and form it into a disc. Okay, then I'm going to grab a sheet of some plastic wrap, and we're just going to wrap this up and refrigerate it. And that's so that our butter gets nice and cold so that we get a flaky pie crust. So we'll refrigerate this for about 45 minutes to an hour. So when our dough is done refrigerating, I'm gonna transfer it to a counter. And you can just kind of whack it with your rolling pin. We wanna roll this out to about 10 to 12 inches in diameter. I'm using a 9-inch pan here, so I don't really need it that big. But you want to work quickly in rolling this out because I don't want the butter to get warm, because that can cause it to become really difficult to then work with and transfer. What I like to do is roll it out, pick it up, and just move it so that it's not staying on the counter, because then the butter can get warm and it can kind of stick to it. It doesn't actually have to be a perfect shape too, because I'm just going to trim the crust off. And actually, you can also use something like this, which one of my viewers sent to me as a gift, which is just like a baking mat that you can measure your pie crust on. And I've used this for my quiche, so I have an idea. But thank you to Chris Jordy Jones for sending this to me. It was so kind. It also came with a rolling pin. But you can use something like that to measure your pie crust with. All right, so for me, that looks good. Going to release it off the counter. It's definitely getting warm. So I'm going to transfer this just like that. And there's no flour or anything in the bottom of the pan. I'm just putting it right in. I've done this in glass baking dishes or stainless steel. Now I'm going to lift the pie crust edges like this. So I just lift that up so I can press the sides in so that we're not pulling on the bottom for the crust to get nice and fitted to the pan. And now I'm going to just take some scissors and I'm going to trim off the pie crust that comes to the end of my pie dish. I have found this to be the easiest way to do the pie edge. I know that you can do some folds and make it pretty. You can crimp the edges, but I found it hard to make it look good. So I just trim the edges and it bakes nice and clean that way. I've just found it to be the easiest way to do it. But you can also press the end with a fork, whatever you like to do to make your pie crust look a little fancy. And then I just take my fingers and go around to smooth some of those cut areas. All right, so now we are going to freeze our pie crust, and this is going to help that butter that's warmed a lot at this point get cold again, and that way we can have a really good crust. Because if we baked it now, the butter would just escape the crust and it would not be good. So we'll freeze this for 15 minutes. So after our pie crust has chilled in the freezer, we're gonna line this with some parchment paper. And then we're gonna use some dried beans. So if you have any sitting in your pantry that you're never gonna use, like me, you can just pour like 2 cups of that, or a cup and a half in there. Or if you have the pie weights that you bake with, even better. And this is just so that our pie crust doesn't rise in the oven. We need it to be weighed down. We're gonna bake this twice in the oven. So this is gonna be the first bake, and I'm just gonna press those beans out a little bit. And now we're gonna bake this in the oven for about 18 to 20 minutes, and I have my oven set at 425. Okay, so while our pie crust is in the oven, we're gonna get our flavorings and the filling ready. So our main flavoring is gonna be bacon and leeks, as I said. So I have 4 strips of a thicker cut bacon. You can use thin cut. I've tested this with that. So whatever you like, but the thicker cut just adds a nice chew to it. And I'll put that in a pan, and we'll just cook that until it's nice and crispy. But I wanted to make this quiche for my sister's bridal shower coming up. She's getting married in like 2 months. And so I'm hosting her bridal shower, and I thought with my other sister that quiche would be a great thing to serve. So I thought, why not make a recipe for the YouTube channel for that? And it's delicious. It's seriously the best quiche that I've had. So it's always better when you make things at home. I always say that. But yeah, this is so good, and I'm excited to share it. But it also just makes for a great Easter brunch or anything for spring. Spring is in the air. It's so beautiful outside. So this is great for Mother's Day or anything. Bridal shower, baby shower, whatever you like, or if you just are craving a quiche. My bacon is nice and crispy. So now I'm going to take that out. I have just a plate lined with paper towels. I want to make sure I'm sopping up any of that extra oil. This bacon smells so good. So we'll set our bacon aside. I like to use a slotted spoon for that, but didn't really have one that was a smaller size. So if you have a lot of grease in your pan, you can discard some of it. We are going to use some of it to cook our leeks in. I might take just a little bit of this out because I don't need all of that. Okay, so I drained a little bit of my fat. Now we're gonna add our leeks. So I have 2 small to medium leeks. I don't want them to be super big. We don't need a ton of leeks. I really cleaned those, but I also finely diced them. I don't wanna have big cuts of leeks in this because it can kind of overwhelm the bite of quiche. So just make sure that you keep that nice and small and really wash them because leeks can be very dirty. Then to our leeks, we're gonna add a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. And we're going to cook the leeks until they are nice and cooked. We don't wanna just cook them until they're soft because however they are cooked in the pan, that's how they're going to be cooked in the quiche. I wanna see some browned edges and just really soft pieces of leeks. Once the leeks are mostly cooked, I'm just gonna add 2 minced or pressed garlic cloves. And we'll just cook those with the leeks for about a minute, just to cook the garlic. They're looking good now, and I'm just gonna transfer them to a bowl and we'll let them cool. Once our pie crust is finished with its first bake, we're gonna remove the pie weights or the beans and then just prick the bottom of the pie crust with a fork just so that the steam can escape. Then we're going to brush the bottom of the pie crust with a little bit of egg wash. This will help just create like a barrier or a seal between the quiche. And I also do this to the crust as well. And then we're gonna bake it again uncovered for 10 minutes. And then to make the rest of our filling for the quiche, we're gonna do 4 eggs. It always kind of seems like quiche should be more than that, but it's a perfect balance of the cream and egg. So there's not too much. Then I'm going to whisk those together. I have this like mini whisk that I'm kind of obsessed with. And I find that I use this a lot, so. Then we're gonna do 1 1/4 cup of half and half. I've done all of heavy cream too in testing, but I found that half and half was like a little bit lighter. So half milk, half cream. Then we're gonna do 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. Then a half a teaspoon of salt. And just for a little bit of a different type of flavor, we're gonna do a pinch of nutmeg. You can do 1/8 of a teaspoon or 1/4 of a teaspoon. And this will just add a nice depth of flavor to the quiche. And then we'll just whisk all of that together. All right, so we have our pie crust out of the oven. And so what we're gonna do first is we have our cooked bacon and leeks. We're gonna place that in the bottom of our pie crust. And then we have 1 cup of shredded sharp cheddar cheese. I used Kerrygold's Reserve Cheddar, and I actually use that cheese in all of my testing. I really love that one for a quiche especially. It has a really great flavor. So that's the cheese that I used. We'll pour our egg and cream mixture over top. And then I'm just gonna use a spoon to mix everything around, get everything evenly distributed. And as you can see, our crust has shrunk a good bit. And I actually didn't mention this, but if you want like a perfect quiche and you don't want any shrinkage, you can actually replace 3 tablespoons of the butter with lard, and that should make your quiche crust really nice. And you won't, or you shouldn't deal with much shrinkage. But I just kept it with butter just to keep it simple. Then, because we brushed the egg wash on the crust, I actually didn't always do that. That was a new thing that I tested, and I found that it gave a way better crust on the whole quiche rather than just doing it on the bottom. So what we're gonna do is we have to put foil around the crust to prevent it from burning, because the egg wash is actually gonna brown the crust even more, and this has to cook for 45 minutes. So what I like to do is, you can actually do this before you put everything in. You can put foil over top and just use your nail to engrave into the foil, and you get the size that you need. And then we're just going to use scissors and cut that shape. So this is gonna make a little covering for just the crust. Then we're gonna take the foil and just put it right under the pan like this. All right, that looks good. So now we're gonna bake this in the oven at 350 degrees for 45 minutes. All right, so our quiche is out of the oven. I gave it some time to cool. We did our final shots of it, and I'm gonna taste it. I don't got any taste testers with me today, but I actually made this, I was testing it like last week, and I had a couple people working at the house, and one of them being my dad and some other people. And so I gave them all the quiche, and they were all raving about it. So good. It has such great flavor. I want to try the actual like edge here. You can see the layers of the butter in our crust, which is great. Yeah, the actual crust is like so buttery, it's flaky, really nice and crisp. I actually am not a huge fan of the thick cut bacon in this. In all my testings, I've always used thin cut bacon. I actually prefer that better because it had like a crispiness. This has more of a chewiness, and it was heavy, so it sunk all to the bottom. So that's like my one critique of my own recipe, but in all my testings, I used thin cut. The leeks are just a beautiful flavor in this. It's perfectly seasoned, perfectly salted. So if you guys need a quiche recipe, this one's great and simple. And if you want to, you can totally cheat with a store-bought crust. I won't blame you there. So, but I hope you guys enjoy this one, and thank you so much for the support and making the recipes, trying them out. I really appreciate it. And as always, I'll catch you in the next recipe, and I'll see you in the comments.